All right, so we've got our new engine, our working engine, up on the stand here. And as you can see on this engine, one of the problems is that the alternator does not have a plug on it. So when they took this engine out of the donor bike, they just snipped that wire right off. And so my plan is just to replace this with a new alternator. We could wire a new plug onto the end of this thing and make it work, but my plan was always to put a new alternator in here because the alternator is the #1 thing to go on these engines, and in order to replace it, you have to take the engine out of the bike. We've already got the engine out of the bike, so I'm taking this opportunity to put a new alternator in. And we've got the alternator right over here. So this is our new alternator. I got this from Radix. It ran me $116. This is $2019. This is supposed to be the upgraded alternator, better than stock. This is how we put it in the bike. Alright, so first step is to remove the clutch. This is the clutch housing right here. Well, the first step is to get the engine out of the bike. Second step is to remove the clutch. There are several bolts that go around here that hold this guy on. So these guys are 8mm on the clutch housing. Drain the oil first. Good. So I'm going to neatly label and organize these parts as I take them off. Clutch cover, all that stuff's going in here. With the cover off, we can now see what is called the clutch lifter piece. This little guy comes out, and I'm going to put it in my little baggie with all the other pieces for the clutch. Now our next step is to remove these 6 bolts off the back of the clutch. And there are springs behind here too, by the way. These are also 10mm. Take these springs out. These I need to measure to make sure that they're within tolerance. We'll get to that later when we go to put them back in. And this nut, as I say, is a hard one to crack. You have to have a special tool for that. I actually had to make a tool for that. Alright, so on this nut here, there's supposed to be a lock washer that fits in between here and then jams off onto one of these buttresses over on the side. I just happen to have another example clutch here off of the same type of engine, and so it's supposed to be this guy. It's supposed to have one of these in there. This goes off to the side and locks onto one of those buttresses over there. That's how it's supposed to work. I don't know why there's not one on this engine. It makes me worry a little bit. This engine runs at least, so we're going to take this apart, and when we put it back together, I'll probably use this lock washer that I very conveniently already have. Just FYI, that's supposed to be on there. So our next step, and this is where it gets complicated, is to get this nut off. And if you take a look at this nut, it's got the 4 little divots on the side. You can buy, this is, I forget what this is, it's like 27mm. I could not locate one cheaper than like $60, so I ended up making one out of a piece of pipe here where I literally just chiseled away at this. This is crude, but it works. So I've got 4 little teeth that poke up there. They fit perfectly in here on that nut. And then you can put a screwdriver through here and turn that on and off. That's what I'm going to go ahead and do now. The thing is, this clutch, it rotates. There it requires another special tool. A special tool that is not mentioned at all in the climber's manual. And so I had to make another tool. This guy fits in here, and then this guy fits over the top. Alright, so there's 3 bolts that come off the clutch housing that are nice and long, and they also are the same thread and everything that fits inside here onto the actual lifter plate here. So I'm going to use these to run through my housing here. And there's the nut. All right, and then next, this whole thing should come sliding out. There is a little washer right here. This guy comes out, and I'm just gonna sort of set everything in order. All of your clutch plates are right here now. I'm gonna keep everything in order as it came off. Throw this guy back on here. All right, so back here, this guy here that's left over in here, this is the clutch housing. That's what this is called. Down here, this guy that fits back in there, this is the pressure plate. And then this guy is your clutch center. In between here, on here, we've got a series of metal clutch plates. That's what this guy is, a metal clutch plate. And these are the friction discs. And these are ones we're gonna have to measure to see how much friction material is still on there and whether or not these are still serviceable, whether they're still good. And so I'm gonna go ahead and zip tie all these guys together so I don't lose anything. And also so I kind of remember what order they went in. Clutch is out of the way now. Basically, that was the point of this exercise, is to get to the alternator right here. So we've got the clutch out of the way. Now we can move this whole back housing here that holds in the alternator. So to do that, there are 11 bolts. There are 11 8mm bolts that hold this guy on here that go around. And then this whole thing, we tap it with a hammer and then it should come off. And then this is the guy we've been looking for. Hiding back on the back side of that cover is our alternator. Here you can see the old alternator versus the new alternator. In order to get this guy off, now it's just a matter of removing these 3 screws here. These are Phillips head, big Phillips head screws, and they're on there pretty good. I tried removing them by hand and that's not gonna work, so we have the impact screwdriver. There, now hopefully this should come out. Alright, so there's the old one. You can see it's pretty gnarly looking, like a bear has been clawing at it. Alright, now installing the new one. This beautiful guy right here. So our first step is to thread the wires through the little opening here. And then we've got our little rubber gasket seal here. The new one only has an O-ring and has no threading components on it at all. And with my fingers, I'm just going to push this and try and seat it in there. Attempt number 2 is we're going to use a brass rod here and a little hammer and try and tap that down. Alright, so you can see on this other mock engine I've got that there is supposed to be a circlip on there. That guy right there. So I'm going to get some circlip pliers and remove this guy and use it on our new one. So I've got my little circlip off the other guy and I stick that on here now. I've got my circlip pliers. So we're going to go ahead and get him there into his little home so he can be happy. Alright, now we're ready to reinstall this guy and put the screws back on here. And so in order to do that, we've got to line up our holes. There's really only one way to line them up. Alright, so I'm gonna use some blue removable thread locker on here. This is the stuff that you do not have to heat up to remove. It's stuff that it will hold it on tight, and like our experience taking this off, it just requires a little bit extra pressure to get it off of there. Alright, so our next step is reinstallation. And to do that, we've got the old gasket. We've got to take this off and put in a new gasket. Alright, so I've gone ahead and cleaned my gasket mating surfaces off on both sides here. And I used some gasket remover. And it worked pretty well. My surfaces are nice and clean at this point. It took a while though. I had to spray it on, wait 15-30 minutes, and then scrape a little bit more of it off. And then spray it on, scrape it off, spray it on, scrape it off. So several hours later, we've got some clean mating surfaces. Now next, we've got copper sprayer gasket in addition to our actual gasket, which are in here somewhere. So the other thing to do while we've got this clutch out is to measure the friction disc and see if they're within the service limit. And the service limit on these is 0.126 of an inch. New ones are supposed to be 0.135 to 0.141 of an inch. So if I measure this guy, these are all within spec. These are in good condition because they're within the new range, essentially, of clutch material. So these are really good. I will reuse these. All right, now I've tried to be careful to keep everything aligned and in order the way it came off with my little zip ties here. But in case you haven't done that, or in case things went awry, it's not that big a deal. Yeah, so we've got a clutch center right here. Start with this guy, and then with these guys, we're looking for to go on first here, the one with the thickest tab. So you can see how all these tabs are on the friction discs. On these guys, you've got the tabs here sticking out, this right here. So we're looking for the one with the thickest tab. And so what they mean by that is the width here, like that. Measure this way. And you kind of have to measure them because they are visually not that much different, but if you actually put a caliper on it, you can see there's indeed a difference there. All of them are like this except for one. One is a little bit wider, so this is the one that goes on first. The manual says there are also little grooves. These grooves in here, according to the manual, these come at an angle. Mine don't. They radiate straight out. If you have ones that come at an angle, you're supposed to angle them counterclockwise. So if the angle was going like that, you would arrange it like this so that it was counterclockwise, that angle. But I don't have that angle, so I am just going to stick it straight on here, like so. Make sure there's some oil on these. And then same thing with the metal discs here. And then you get to the laminated damper plate. This is in the middle. So you should have 1, 2, 3, 4 of these friction discs in here, and then you've got the laminated damper plates. I'm going to do the same thing with this guy. We're going to oil him up. Alright, now we take our pressure plate, install that over the whole thing, and now our assembly is done. Now we can go and install this on the actual engine. Alright, so first and back we've got this guy, this tooth washer here. Stick that guy on here. Then comes our clutch assembly here, and this guy goes on like so. And it's a little tricky because you've got to get all these tabs to align in the center at the same time and slide them on here, as well as get the spline aligned on here on the transmission shaft. Now we've got this flat washer that goes in here. Then you've got the lock washer. This goes in, and then the locking part goes over one of these little buttresses here, just like that. And then our nut, final nut here goes on. And this screws on here. Then we've got to get our special homemade tools out again and tighten this thing down. Alright, it says to tighten it to 27 to 30 foot-pounds. So I think I'm there. And I'm just going by feel. That's it. I don't have a way to put a torque wrench on this. Alright, so now you can see there's this lock washer has a series of little tabs that run around the outside of it. This one tab is lined up with the indentation on the nut, and so that is the tab. We need to bend that down into that indentation. Alright, so our next step is to measure the springs. So we're measuring what's called the free length of the spring. So that just means an uncompressed length. Measure this guy, and it is 1.37 of an inch, this one. So they're supposed to be within 1.35 and 1.40 of an inch. These guys are usable, but I have some better ones. So I'm going to install the better ones from a different engine. They just happen to be a little bit longer, a little bit, have more service life to them. And I'm going to use those and install those in here next. Now our next step is to install the clutch lifter plate, this guy here. Alright, so when you're installing everything, take note, these threaded portions that come through the plate here, there's a difference. There you've got two bolts here. You've got these two bolts that are longer than all the other bolts. There they are. So you've got the two long ones, the rest of them are the short ones like that. And the difference is on this guy, and it's something to pay attention to when you're installing everything, is that you can see that the threads are recessed back on that one, whereas if you look at like this one right here, the threads are right at the surface. So it's these two, that one and the opposing one over here, you want to take note of, because those are the ones where they're going to use the longer bolts. And so I'm going to start off with the longer bolts to begin with. Alright, and then once you've got them all in, you want to tighten them down gradually in a diagonal pattern. A little bit here, a little bit there. And now they're all snug. I've got them tightened down all the way till they're snug. They don't want to go any further, and they're all evenly snug all the way around. The next thing is to torque them down. They're supposed to be 7 to 10 foot-pounds all the way around. And same thing, you want to torque them down in a diagonal pattern. Alright, now we've got the clutch lifter piece, this guy here, and that just goes in the end like that. My next step is to take my gasket, spray it with the copper coat, and stick it on here, and we'll torque it all down. Alright, now everything is snug, but there are no torque specs provided by the manual. So, everything seems to be 7 to 10 foot-pounds. We're going to go with that. So the unofficial torque specs that I just made up. So that completes our alternator replacement. If that's all you were doing today, your job is done. You can go ahead and put this engine back into the motorcycle, pat yourself on the back, and I hope this video was helpful. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Keep on wrenching. Poo-poo.